Friends flew in from across the country to bid aviator Cole Pay farewell. They packed into St Andrew's Uniting Church and the adjoining hall, the overflow of mourners gathering on the grass outside. Inside, his friend Phil Hurst spoke of a man whose passion for flying was only surpassed by his love for his wife of 47 years and his family.
Colin's other love to flying was Diane Woods, who came into his life about the same time as the Tiger Moth.
His legacy will live on through his son Ross, who is also a pilot. Today, he borrowed the words of a poem to comfort mourners.
Should my end come while I am in flight, whether brightest day or darkest night, spare me your pity and shrug off the pain, secure in the knowledge that I'd do it again. For each of us is created to die, and within me I know I was born to fly.
The pioneer aviator was killed 6 days ago when his plane crashed into Lake Liddell near Muswellbrook. He'd been on the verge of making history, the fatal flight, a test run for a new design of water-bombing aircraft capable of lifting water straight out of a river or dam. Cole had been flying for nearly 50 years. Laid to rest, eyes then turned skyward for a fitting salute from a rural fire service bomber. But it was pilot Guy Burke, trained by Cole, who had the final farewell, wagging the wings of a Spitfire identical to Cole's beloved warplane in a special goodbye.
It was a real honour to be able to do that today for him. Tried to not let the emotions sort of get too much ahead of me, really.
Christy Carter, NBN News.
For many sick people, these vans are a lifeline, their only way of getting to and from medical treatment. But across the state each year, 90,000 people are turned away by community transport providers.
The report results obviously were surprising even to us. We knew that there was quite an issue, but 90,000 people a year is just it's incredible and it's unacceptable.
The Cancer Council, along with the state's Council of Social Service and Community Transport Organisation, commissioned the report. It found on average 1 in 8 requests for transport is refused, meaning patients either delay treatment or miss it altogether.
We know that the state government has invested a lot of money into health services like radiotherapy and oncology centres. But what good are these if people can't get to them?
The organisations want action from the state government, which currently funds just 10% of community transport service costs. It's being urged to more than triple its funding to $10 million a year.
Port Stephens' population is expected to almost double by 2031, making it the fastest growing council region in the Hunter. To ensure its future viability, an economic development strategy and an events plan has been developed for the Shire.
If you don't have these plans and you don't keep rejuvenating your area, then the public will just go somewhere else. They'll either move somewhere else to live and to create their businesses, or the tourist will go to some other area, Queensland or Victoria.
Central to the plan is the expansion of the region's business and industrial sectors to provide employment for the influx of new residents.
We need to create, I think it's something like 12,000 jobs over the next 20 years, and the research shows that that's possible.
Of course, to do that, Council will need to encourage businesses not only to set up in the area, but also to relocate from cities like Sydney and even overseas.
We've been very active in the Japanese and Korean market. The emerging market of India is on the doorstep with people from that area visiting, and that's the start of a whole new era.
One business has already expressed its faith in the area, today announcing it will spend $19.2 million setting up new manufacturing and office facilities in Tomago.
The initial term will be 90 more people, but I see the way AMP Control is growing, we could see another growth of another 400 people in the region over time.
Madeline Bond, NBN News. It's not exactly what you'd expect to see at an inner-city bus stop, a group of Christmas carolers spreading festive cheer. Their tunes are so catchy that every now and then even spectators join in. The A Cappella Nova group will be gracing various inner-city bus routes and stops with their vocal talents each Wednesday until Christmas. Meanwhile, a group of students have been making small sacrifices of their own to come up with the money to buy 100 food hampers for people in need.
They've given up their own time, they've given up some of their own resources, where they actually went to school, and instead of buying that can of Coke at the canteen, they used that money and they put that into the fund and went and got a glass of water.
Predominantly Margaret Jerd Learning Centre students, they came up with the idea after watching the movie Pay It Forward, in which good deeds are done for strangers.
We just thought that we wanted to help the community, and this was a good way of doing it.
It feels good to give people food that are in need.
Madeline Bond, NBN News.
With their season hanging in the balance, the Jets' loss to Sydney last weekend did little for morale, leaving the players flat at training earlier this week.
But yesterday they trained exceptionally well, which is very, very positive for this weekend's game.
Still searching for a solution to the goal drought, Jets coach Gary Van Egmond is likely to use new signing James Holland up front, but says he won't be expected to perform miracles.
We can't hang a hat on one kid, and there's no way I'm going to be putting pressure on someone like young James, and the message to him is to go out and enjoy his football.
The 18-year-old showed glimpses of his potential in a 2-week stint with the team earlier this year and isn't getting overawed by the occasion.
I try not to sort of read the newspapers and listen to things like that because I feel it could sort of sidetrack a player.
The Jets head to Melbourne on Saturday sporting an impressive record at the Dome for a game where both teams will be desperate to stay in touch with the top four.
If we want to keep on putting more pressure on ourselves, then a good way of doing that would definitely be losing this weekend, and that's not what we're about.
Van Egmond believes the finals race will be decided in the last round. Mitchell Hughes, NBN News. His horses are champing at the bit to get back to the starting gate after receiving plenty of TLC during the EI crisis. But trainer Darren Smith is taking every precaution to ensure their long-term health. A host of runners have been back at work since mid-November. However, they won't be racing again until they're cleared of secondary infections by follow-up health checks.
We're going to try and cover all bases, and so at the end of January our horses are at the races fully fit.
Smith says champion 4-year-old Court Command looks better than ever despite the layoff.
The horse looks terrific. and he'll be set for the better races in February, March.
At Broadmeadow, the only long faces will be on the horses when racing resumes this Saturday, as long as the weather holds out.
Oh, look, it never rains on a race day. It'll be fine on Saturday, no problem at all.
Smith's horses will be missing in action, but 70 runners from other well-known trainers will line up for the 7-race program.
Very well represented, like runners from Sydney, including Gay Waterhouse and, of course, Paul Perry and Chris Lees.
The NJC will hold further barrier trials on Monday as life begins to get back to normal at beautiful Broadmeadow. Mitchell Hughes, NBN News.
Danny Goodall's widow was inconsolable after learning the man responsible for her 28-year-old husband's death would serve a 4-year jail sentence. 38-year-old James Dean Cookson was intoxicated and racing against a friend on Marsh Road at Bob's Farm when he hit Danny's small truck in February.
I've lost everything. He's not only taken Danny's life away, he's taken my life away, my future. Danny and I were planning a family.
When reading his sentence, Judge Gregory Hosking noted Cookson had been previously charged for reckless driving with a high-range blood alcohol level, a fact Mr Goodall's family found incomprehensible.
Because I would locked him up in 2004 when I got caught drink driving, my son was still here.
Madeline Bond, NBN News.
EA's Western Grandstand was built in the 1960s and it shows it's not uncommon for the hot water to run out and access is a nightmare.
We've also spent $1.6 million actually bringing it to some sort of a standard, but unfortunately we haven't even got a lift.
But there is some light at the end of the tunnel.
New change rooms, new facilities. I think everybody, particularly the players, will welcome this.
Don't be blinded though by the spit and shine of a shovel. There's still some way to go in the $60 million project. So stage 1 is underway, but what about the ones to follow? Well, according to the state, that's up to the Commonwealth. The Rudd government has been asked to give $30 million towards the redevelopment. So far, it's committed $10 million.
You don't start these things without having a pretty fair expectation that the funding will be there.
Adam McIlrick, NBN News.
He's not an everyday alcoholic, from what I'd imagine, but in terms of he very much acknowledges that once he's drinking, he has a problem.
It was a Christmas party for Jets fans, but it may yet double as a farewell bash for Mario Jardel. Club chairman Con Constantine will no longer instruct coach Gary Van Egmond to play the former Brazilian, leaving his future at Newcastle all but up.
It's a matter of the management team now with Mario's agent or Mario himself to come in and say, okay, do we be part now and go forward or wait till the end of the season?
It's likely to be the former, with Jardel expected to return home in time for Christmas, which would end a less than illustrious stay at Newcastle. The episode, though, hasn't scared Constantine off trying to lure more overseas talent.
You've got to take the risks. It doesn't matter if it's football or business, you must take a certain risk.
And despite the strain it placed on the working relationship with the club's coach, the chairman makes no apologies for influencing team selection.
That happens with the best clubs in the world, not only in Australia. The best clubs in the world, the chairman will always have the last say, that's regardless.
As for the future of Ollie Roos, Mark Bridge and Stu Michalek, Constantine remains confident of retaining the pair despite withdrawing a previous offer. One thing is for sure, the new deal won't be the $130,000 a year season previously offered. The team plays in Melbourne on Sunday.
First time in 4 months that we're back here tomorrow night. It's just a relief to be able to come back here to race again.
For breast cancer patients, the fear of the disease returning after treatment is all too real. But a new trial of the drug anastrozole involving 9,000 women over 100 months has had some encouraging results.
About 25% of the recurrences that might have occurred by 9 years are avoided by taking anastrozole compared with tamoxifen.
The drug will now be used to treat postmenopausal women with early-stage breast cancer, which accounts for 75% of all cases. The ATAC trial, led by Newcastle University professor John Forbes, showed women were protected from the disease returning 4 years after they stopped taking anastrozole, which has in turn increased long-term survival rates.
These data mean that the treatment of breast cancer has changed and will continue to change.
The results come as a huge relief for breast cancer sufferers, including Gwen Riggs.
You take a drug for 5 years and you know it's protecting you while you're taking it. But to actually hear that there are another 4 years on top of that it's protecting you when you've stopped taking it is amazing.
Madeline Bond, NBN News. It's a fairly basic theory aimed at saving some of nature's most majestic creatures.
If you see animals up close in their environment, you're more likely to care for them rather than treat them as food.
From next May through to November, 3 Port Stephens tour operators will offer people with a valid Japanese passport free tickets to see humpback whales on their migratory routes to and from Antarctica. The scheme aims to encourage Japanese tourists to better appreciate the gigantic mammals.
They sadly don't have any large whales off their coast. I don't know whether it's because they've eaten them all.
Tour operators estimate thousands of tourists will take up the offer, with between 3 and 4 million people boarding the region's whale and dolphin watching vessels over the past 16 years. Madeline Bond, NBN News.
Finally, a crowd back at Broadmeadow. Racegoers were allowed on the course after the EI shutdown and associated measures to contain it, which were put in place back in August.
Hopefully that won't last too much longer. They're obviously outside of our control, but yeah, we're all a bit ring rusty, so it does give us a good opportunity to have a good hit out for Boxing Day.
You couldn't hide the impact of EI altogether. While the general public was largely unaffected, biosecurity measures were in place around the stables and racing enclosures, with only a limited number of staff allowed in the red zone, including jockeys. Extra barriers separated them from the green zone, with even the odd trainer opting to stay outside.
And it's probably ridiculous in some areas because of a morning at track work there's no restrictions, so we just battle on as normal, but as soon as the races start we put the barriers up, so I don't know what it's achieving, but we've got to do it.
Lees agrees, though, it's a small price to pay to have racing back. However, it's going to take some time before the industry is back to pre-EI standard.
I think it's going to take another 6 months or so to where, got some type of normality. I know just from my own stable, we're still probably a month away to being back to where we were before it broke out.
He's one of us. The cycling fraternity sticks together. We come together at times like this.
It was a crackdown on crime, the likes of which the Lower Hunter has rarely seen. Over the past 5 days, 36 officers and police dogs patrolled streets across the command and targeted traffic offenders. Of the 81 people arrested, 24 were wanted criminals.
So I expect that the results from this command will have a positive impact upon the Commission of Crime.
The Vikings operation targeted crime hotspots in Cessnock, Maitland and Nelson Bay. 156 charges have been laid, from supplying illegal drugs to abduction.
It's been a fluid operation. It's been based on intelligence, but also based on circumstances as they develop.
The availability of ice and cannabis has now been curbed, with police shutting down an alleged drug house at Rutherford.
Police executed a search warrant upon a suspected drug house. A number of persons have been arrested in relation to activities within those premises.
Madeline Bond, NBN News. The graphic depiction of life in Sri Lanka 5 months after the tsunami is nothing short of eye-opening. Newcastle aid worker Don Patterson is still haunted by the experience.
I do still, even just sort of thinking about some of the stuff there gets me, it's emotional for sure.
The third wave has already screened at New York's Tribeca Festival.
They really received it well over there, but I think the Aussie audience is going to receive it a bit better. They'll get a bit more of my humour and larrikinisms.
The third wave premieres at Greater Union Newcastle tomorrow night.
After a year of complications, Josh Ross has simplified his return. He's now running for fun and will let results take care of themselves.
It was a tough year, but I've learned a lot from it, and that fun was missing out of the athletics. And if that's gone, there's really no use doing it anymore. That's what drives you, that's why you do it.
A controversial change in coach led to being overworked and overseas, a combination which saw the 4-time national 100-metre champion burnt out and underperforming at the year's biggest meet, the World Championships. He's now settled back home on the Central Coast with his mother, has a new coach, but the same self-belief.
I know what I'm capable of doing. I believe in my ability, so I'm just going to go out there, have fun, and I don't have anything to prove to anyone, so I'm just going to go out there, and main focus is Beijing and do what I do best, and that's run.
Returning to running at a foot race at Newcastle, where he gave some runners up to 16 metres head start, Ross didn't reach the final, but aims to be on the pace when Asafa Powell arrives here next year, while also preparing for the World Indoor titles in Spain and, of course, Beijing.
Yeah, I think there's plenty of time to do that. I'm training well, I'm moving well at training, so I'll just keep doing what I'm doing, listen to coach, stay focused, and I'll come Beijing, I'll be okay.
Forensic police and fire investigators today combed the burnt-out Ocean View Road dwelling, looking for clues as to how the blaze started. Fire crews were called to the detached brick villa at around 3 o'clock this morning after neighbours reported it on fire. With the family car in the driveway, there were fears for the safety of the occupants, a couple and their 2 children. While firefighters who arrived to find the home fully alight didn't find the family inside, they did rescue their pets, Poppet the Jack Russell, 2 goldfish and a yabby. Sadly, nothing else was able to be saved. Among the items to perish, the family's Christmas presents. Police say the blaze looks to have started in a bedroom of the home. While the exact cause is not yet known, investigators are treating it as suspicious. Christy Carter, NBN News.
The new owner had just bought the 36-foot Mumbo in Townsville and was sailing it to its new home in Sydney. But this morning the crew made an unscheduled visit to Newcastle after a horror night at sea. Limping into the harbour, the yacht looked okay above the waterline, but it was a different case below, with the keel severely damaged 80 kilometres offshore.
Last night it was pretty rough out there with large swell, and at about 4 o'clock in the morning we're going along and went down a big wave, and then the boat started making some strange noises down below.
After tying up at the Newcastle Marina, the captain said the yacht had been bouncing from one wave to another last night, which caused jarring and stress on the keel. On closer examination, they realised the keel was wobbling. A weld in the structure that supports the keel had failed, and they thought it might snap off. They prepared themselves for the boat to capsize.
When that happened, it was the sort of thing that they take you through for sea safety survival courses. So we made sure everyone was up on deck. We got our grab bag. We got our life raft ready to deploy.
It's a disappointing outcome for the new owner, the yacht now needing to be repaired in Newcastle, while plans to sail in the Pittwater to Coffs yacht race have been scuttled. Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
It was a very public show of policing after months of criticism about the thin blue line across the Lower Hunter. From Cessnock to Maitland and Nelson Bay, police flooded the streets. The 5-day operation netting 81 people, 24 of them wanted criminals.
Street crime, public order, drugs, alcohol-related crime, road trauma.
Today, the operation received a glowing report card from mayors in the Lower Hunter Command area. They say Viking has sent a clear message to criminals.
You're not going to get away with that sort of crime.
It's a very positive step, and it will make a big difference to the town.
The Cessnock Chamber of Commerce estimates crime to have cost its businesses nearly $750,000 in the past year. It wants more police in the area, and at a public forum tonight is urging people to notify police of any incident as a way of highlighting true crime levels in the area.
They've got to take some action themselves, and they've got to be responsible for what happens. So we're going to be discussing ways that they can be a bit more proactive.
Peter Blackmore also wants the bail system reviewed.
The community are saying to the court system, we want to see a more meaningful sentence within the law. And of course the police want to see that too, that they don't want to be arresting somebody and then find out that they've been let go.
Christy Carter, NBN News.
Dominic Mason's life was cut short last Tuesday when he was struck by a semi-trailer while on a training ride. Today, the 33-year-old was farewelled by family, friends, colleagues and members of the Kooragang Cycling Club. His death has prompted heated debate from bike riders and motorists in terms of how to share roads safely. Among those speaking out, Olympic cyclist and Novocastrian Olivia Gollan.
I ride my bike far more than I drive my car, and it's very close to home. Every incident that occurs with a cyclist, it makes me really question what I do.
Olivia believes an education program for drivers and riders along with an overhaul of cycle lanes may be the solution. She also thinks attitudes need to change. She's constantly on the receiving end of aggressive behaviour.
And I think that's simply because people aren't used to having bikes on the road, and that there's an attitude towards cyclists that we're holding traffic up.
Today, instead of flowers, Dominic's family asked mourners to make a donation to the Amy Gillett Foundation, an organisation which aims to reduce the incidence of death and injury among cyclists. Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
The spirit of Christmas arrived in an unexpected form at Carey's Place this morning. Maitland Mayor Peter Blackmore presenting a treasure trove of gifts to the Women's Refuge.
All too often the women or the mothers will leave home under very nasty conditions, particularly with domestic violence. They gather the children up and they don't have anything.
Sadly, for families living with domestic violence, Christmas isn't always a happy time of year.
Because of overspending or because of being together with a family for so many days and so many weeks and lots of alcohol, it is a very ripe time for domestic violence to occur.
Meanwhile, the future of the refuge's drop-in centre remains uncertain, with Community Services Minister Kevin Green yet to reveal whether the state government will provide ongoing funding.
I rang on Friday to see where it's up to, but no decision has been made yet.
If the $62,000 doesn't come through, the drop-in services will be cut by around 90%.
At the moment, every day, maybe 2-3 women turn up in crisis as a drop-in centre. At the refuge, we can't do that because it's a confidential address. We won't have a shop front, so women in crisis have nowhere to go.
Madeline Bond, NBN News.
Teaching is a demanding job, but for Mark Said, it's particularly challenging. Not only does he teach science, maths and English, but he also teaches life skills to disadvantaged kids who haven't been able to attend school due to their family situation.
We work on making sure that they're not out in the streets or basically getting up mischief. So the idea is that they maintain a normal school day.
There's no chalk and talk at the Allambie Learning Centre. Lessons are completely interactive. The Windale facility, which was officially opened today, aims to help children integrate back into mainstream schools. The centre is also working on a pathway to TAFE, where students get recognition for subjects studied.
We have small motor groups running, we do education around surf lifesaving and all sorts of different programs.
Currently funded by DOCS, the centre will need sponsorship if it's to remain open. Christy Carter, NBN News.
James Netties isn't one to dwell on what could have been, but it was a little hard today given the way he finished the Australian Open. Forced to rush, his final hole almost certainly cost him more than $60,000 extra in prize money, second place, and a top 3 finish on the Order of Merit, which brings with it added privileges.
One shot less would have done so much more for me. But, you know, in retrospect, good week, good finish to the year, and yeah, I'm back.
It's not a bad outlook considering the tough year he's endured overseas chasing starts in America. But now with confidence restored, he's looking forward to what the new year brings.
I'm confident I got my game back and I feel like that, you know, I'm back in golf, and so just regroup and, you know, I'm out there to play good golf, so no point crying about it.
For the record, Netties finished 6th on the Order of Merit. Next best of the Hunter contingent was Nick Flanagan. Several of them, though, arrived at Pecolbin's Cypress Lakes Resort late today for the famed Jack Newton Celebrity Classic, which draws both professionals and celebrities together for the charity event starting tomorrow.
It's like the Christmas party for pros.
Jim Callanan, NBN News. Jetting back in today with all three competition points, Newcastle's Christmas cheer has come early. Joel Griffith's stocking may yet come with a Socceroos shirt given his performance last night. A stunning free kick in the second half, giving his team the lead. And with the new Australian coach watching on, Griffiths backed that up with a second to top the A-League scorer sheet and surely the Socceroos selection list.
Everything I touch seems like it just goes in, so I'm pretty happy with where I'm at.
It continues a wonderful year for Griffiths, which culminates on Friday with his wedding. But proving he won't change, the mercurial striker drew a fourth booking against Melbourne in a moment of frustration and will incur a one-game suspension.
It's just me, isn't it? In a nutshell, I can't do anything about it. I can't take that out of my game. I don't care what anyone says.
Andrew Durante is another who'll miss the next match against Wellington. However, import Denny is sure to retain his spot after scoring his first goal since arriving at Newcastle. The Jets in third place on the ladder, and with 3 of their last 4 games at home, top 2 aspirations are back in the frame.
Hobbling onto a rescue helicopter with a wound to his right buttock is probably not the holiday snap the 31-year-old Western Australian man was hoping for. He had to be rushed from Port Stephens north of Newcastle to hospital in the city for emergency surgery on the shark bite.
The shark left a 10 centimetre wound, deep gash, partial thickness into the subcutaneous fat, limited bleeding but a lot of pain.
The attack happened at this break known as the Boulders, off a remote beach along the northern foreshore of Port Stephens. A fisherman came to the aid of the injured surfer and drove him several kilometres to the nearby Tea Gardens ambulance station for treatment of the gaping wound. The shark bite victim recounted his frightening ordeal, which happened while he was surfing with 2 other board riders, to ambulance officers Travis Musica and Bob Richards as they treated his wound.
He just noticed some bait fish in front of him. Next minute he just felt a bite on his right buttock on the lateral side. He didn't see the shark at that stage. He looked around, saw the shark, he gave it a whack, so he explained.
The surfer is reported to be in a stable condition. The injury is not considered life-threatening. Gary Blair, NBN News. Under the original Hexham Bridge, mid-river, police make the catch of the day. The end of an attempt by the man aged in his 40s from the Taree area to evade capture after Highway Patrol officers spotted a stolen car southbound on the Pacific Highway near Karua travelling at high speed.
They've attempted to stop the vehicle. The vehicle has not stopped, so they've engaged in a pursuit. The pursuits ended up down on Hexham Bridge, where the vehicle's been stopped and the driver's then been seen to jump into the river.
The dramatic end of the chase witnessed by Jessica Rainsley as the teenager and her father prepared to go fishing in the family's new runabout.
And so Dad was putting the boat in, and then there's police people and sirens and flashing lights on the bridge.
Police commandeered the Ainsley's vessel, but with no key to start the outboard motor because it had been inadvertently left at the family home, officers had to row to make their arrest. Not the police minded, with the man needing to be rescued, the public help drew official praise.
We do appreciate the assistance of that member of the community for the use of his boat. If he hadn't have been there, he would have had a lot longer stay in the water.
The man's been charged with robbery and traffic offences and refused bail to appear in Cessnock Local Court tomorrow. Gary Blair, NBN News.
Detectives made the chilling discovery of human remains in a barrel of acid at a storage shed at Tomago, north of Newcastle, in October. They're believed to be those of Newcastle man Paul Bell, a former manager of the Nobbies Beach kiosk. A post-mortem examination failed to formally identify the remains, so now DNA samples are being used as a last resort. Those results are due back from the forensic lab in 2 weeks, and it's hoped they'll confirm whether or not the body in the barrel was that of Mr. Bell. Meantime, police have now handed a report to the coroner into the disappearance of veteran yachtsman Ron Anderson. The 73-year-old went missing from his yacht at Shoal Bay in Port Stephens after sailing up the coast from Pittwater with another man in July. The crewman was cleared of any involvement in the disappearance, and after exhausting all leads in the investigation, police now presume Mr. Anderson is dead. The coroner will release his findings next year. Paul Lobb, NBN News. Ambulance officer Wayne Garner and his 8-year-old German Shepherd, Cooper, are normally inseparable. But back on the 8th of June, as many Newcastle suburbs were slowly slipping under floodwater, Wayne was on duty, helping people survive the deluge, unaware his own home and pet were in danger.
Because I was in other areas, I couldn't get back to my house till late that night. And that was just before the height of the water actually hit Newcastle. I finally got to come home and rescue my dog.
Wayne was one of around 80 Hunter and Central Coast staff recognised today for their tireless work during that week.
When tragedy is in front of us, it's never an easy job, and staff behave very professionally. They stuck to their duty and they did it in quite difficult circumstances on occasions, and we're just really pleased to be able to take this opportunity to say thank you and to appreciate a job well done.
Wayne is only just moving back into his New Lambton house after major repairs. Thankful he was able to add his best friend to a long list of lives saved by the Ambos on that horrific weekend.
Cooper was actually standing on the top step of the small alcove, front door alcove, and he had water across his neckline. So if I hadn't have got to him when I did, I think I would have lost him.
Paul Lobb, NBN News.
You don't have to look far to see that this golf tournament is a little, well, different. From a Roman centurion to the pyjama party, it's where professional golfers look anything but and celebrities try to be golfers, no matter what they say.
Now, Lavinia, I'm told you're a wonderful golfer.
This man,
I love
Chris
those questions,
Brown.
Jimmy. This is the rumour I'm trying to circulate around this golf course right now, that the lady next to me is one of Australia's up-and-coming, if not preeminent professionals.
And you know what? This doesn't help me.
After a shot like this, we'll take Chris's word for it. There's a serious side to this event as well, with money raised for Diabetes Australia and junior golf. They just make sure they have a lot of fun doing it.
I said if I can get them to come here, they always seem to want to come back.
And come they have for the past 29 years for a tournament that pitches pros with celebrities, and it's a great mix. Kerry-Ann Kennelly looked every bit at home, while others felt right out of their depth. Andrew Johns teeing up with US PGA Tour player Nathan Green.
I'm a bit nervous because I'm not playing too well. It's always tough when you don't really know where the ball's going.
I might give him a few tips. How to throw a club and how to swear at referees or something.
Current Knights captain Danny Medeiros had a leave pass from pre-season training, but that didn't mean there wasn't pressure to perform with James Nitties and his group. The event wraps up tomorrow and the public is encouraged to attend. A self-made multi-millionaire, Con Constantine lives up to the moniker by employing a simple management strategy. The final decision is his. He also doesn't mince his words, remaining adamant the current lease arrangement at Energy Australia Stadium is unfair to his club, saying he should get an even share on control at the ground with the Knights West Group entity which currently manages it.
Whatever the cost is, we split it on the basis that we get catering rights, porridge rights, naming rights. Simple.
In reality, though, it isn't. Currently, Con pays around $12,000 per game. A fair deal, say Wests, who have figures proving the Jets don't generate a catering profit unless at least 11,000 fans turn up on game day.
There is always two sides to every story. That's their story. If that's the case, they're not making money out of us. Why don't they let us run our own show and move forward?
Ever the businessman, Con says the grand plan remains to have both football clubs run under the one operation.
We've got two offices. We're doubling on doctors, physios, all the rest of it. Everything's double. There's no need for it. You can run two clubs out of one office. One is a winter sport, the other one is a summer sport. It's so simple, so simple.
Tomorrow night, more from the Jets' enigmatic owner, including the possible return of former captain Paul Ocon as a coach.
Paddling more than 2,000 kilometres from Foster to New Zealand in a two-man kayak is certainly a mighty feat. But add to that 10 days of paddling in circles, and the fatigue is certainly starting to take its toll on Sydney kayakers Justin Jones and James Castrician.
We've really struggled the last couple of weeks in getting caught up in that whirlpool of an eddy, and forcing us back towards Australia. But now we're back on track and heading strongly towards New Zealand.
Barnacle growth on the kayak's hull added to the adventurers' woes, reducing their paddle to a low speed. The boys forced to dive overboard and focus their strength into scrubbing the large barnacles off.
It really felt good to have a clean hull. Can't believe how much all the growth on the bottom of the boat was slowing us down. I'm pretty tempted to almost jump in on a daily basis now and give it a good old scrub. Oh no! I don't know, just joking about that one.
Calmer conditions are predicted over the coming days, with the Lot 41 crew looking to take advantage of currents to edge them closer to Auckland. Renee Murphy, NBN News.
Last year we met Dr Jodie Simpson and her team from the Hunter Medical Research Institute, who were looking at new treatments and trialling a common antibiotic for people with poor asthma control. 18 months on and they've released some very positive results from the 45 asthmatics involved in the study.
We gave some patients with asthma the antibiotic and some patients got a placebo medication. And after 8 weeks, what we found is that patients who received the antibiotic actually had a reduction in the inflammation in their airways, but also they had an improvement in their quality of life. So they were feeling better as a result of this new treatment.
In addition to their regular asthma medications, participants received the commonly available antibiotic Clasid, a drug commonly used for bacterial infections. People with asthma have sensitive airways in their lungs, and when exposed to certain triggers, their airways narrow, making it harder to breathe. But not every asthmatic is the same, so Jodie's team is homing in on the many types of asthma to improve management of the condition.
Well, I guess this is the first step towards investigating new treatments for asthma and more specific treatments for different kinds of inflammation.
Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
The latest in a long list of cruise liners to visit Newcastle, the Mercury emerged from behind Nobby's breakwater this morning, the city turning on a perfect blue sky for the welcome. At 264 metres long, she is the largest liner to stop by and carries almost 2,000 passengers and 800 crew. Novocastrians lined the shore to witness the spectacle, and the early risers aboard the ship returned to the welcome, some already dressed, others in their pyjamas.
I think it's beautiful and I think it's wonderful for Newcastle.
Should be more of them. Yeah, bigger the better.
Too big to moor at the normal Throsby Wharf, she was guided across to Dyke Point and passengers were ferried back to shore where they were welcomed by volunteers.
I was looking forward to coming here. It's my first time down here in this part of the world and so far it's been great.
A fleet of buses was ready to take the visitors on tours everywhere from Port Stephens to Maitland and the Vineyards, while those who chose to explore the city had the resurrected mall markets to look at.
So when you talk passenger expenditure, crew expenditure, port costs, this vessel today will bring in about $500,000 to the local economy.
The military-like operation ends at 7 o'clock tonight when the ship is due to sail. The Mercury will make 2 more visits to Newcastle, one in January, another in February. Paul Lobb, NBN News.
Five months ago, the Waratah Bowling Club closed due to financial difficulties. It's since become the target of vandals, much to the despair of locals.
To see the vandalism and the ruin that it was being exposed to, I was genuinely very concerned that a major facility was going to be lost to the community.
But today the keys were handed over by the Minister for Lands to 2 community organisations which will refit and manage the building and the grounds. The Ethnic Communities Council has been searching for a new headquarters for 8.5 years and says this is the best possible Christmas present.
We provide services such as aged daycare centres, respite support, supporting people who are isolated, education, particularly preschool and children's support.
Life Without Barriers will share the site. It provides a range of support services to people with disabilities. Both groups plan to develop community gardens on the greens, similar to what Life Without Barriers has already done at their Parry Street site, formerly the National Park Bowling Club. Jane Goldsmith, NBN News. It was one of Jodie McKay's state election platforms to form a group to investigate education requirements in Newcastle's inner city. Their recommendations have now been delivered to the Education Minister, including a plan for a new building at Newcastle East Public.
It also made a recommendation in terms of extra buildings and getting rid of some of the demountables at the Junction Public School and recognising that some of that growth will occur at the Junction.
It's expected that 6,500 residents will move into the city in the next 25 years, but they're still unclear about the future demand on schools.
We had 3 demographers that presented to the group over the last 6 months, and certainly there is no clear indication of the number of children that is expected to grow.
And in terms of adult education, WEA will take over the former Big Al's site in King Street, while the university is moving 3,000 business and law students into town. Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
He's Blackbutt Reserve's own wildlife warrior. For the past 12 years, Paul Metcalf has worked day and night, guiding visitors and nurturing animals. Paul's one of the main reasons the park has remained free to the public, despite suffering damage in the June storms and being subject to Newcastle City budget cuts. But after this weekend, someone else will have to champion the nature reserve's cause.
Who knows what will happen to Blackbutt Reserve? The community will support Blackbutt Reserve and it'll go on to be whatever Blackbutt's meant to be, but it's time that I moved on.
Paul's leaving Newcastle in just a few weeks after accepting a managerial position at Dubbo's Western Plains Zoo. There he'll be in charge of 25 staff, working with bigger budgets and more exotic animals.
To be able to go and be part of the work they're doing with the black rhinos, white rhinos, giraffe, that's all exciting sort of stages, and to be involved in the conservation work that sort of major zoos are undertaking is a fantastic opportunity.
No doubt there'll be a few tears shed when he farewells his many furry and feathered friends.
Despite the season he's enjoyed, Adam Deputso hasn't attracted the headlines many Australian under-23 players have. Not that he's disappointed, far from it. If anything, it's helped him remain focused on the job at hand.
When you're playing well, everything's nice and up. So when you're at home, you're happy. When you're around your friends, they're happy. So it's been a very good year for me. I just want to keep it going.
And a lot of it's due to hard work. Making the most of his chance early in the season, he repaid the faith shown by Gary Van Egmond, scoring an Ollie Roos start to boot, and a big showing in the final series would all but book his spot for the Beijing Olympics.
It'd be good if you make the finals, and if you make your name in the final series of the A-League, you should be, in the top 20.
With Joel Griffiths and Andrew Durante to miss the Wellington match, Deputso will play an important role. And who said the coach stole Christmas? Gary Van Egmond helped cook today's lunch at the Wesley Mission. Training sessions are also on the menu for Sunday, while the boys return to work on Boxing Day. Newcastle Rowing Club was first established in the 1800s, but its history line has ebbed and flowed due to the fact it's never had a place to call its own. Most recently forced to move out of the now condemned Throsby Wharf cargo sheds, the club has long been working towards its own facility. And finally today, the last hurdle was cleared.
Getting to this stage has been a lot harder than it will be to actually put the building up.
It's a complicated scenario, but essentially this tract of land, which included 2 separate titles, has been combined, with the state government now leasing it back to the club to build on.
Initially we're building what we're calling stage 1, which is the shell of the building, the boat storage and amenities so that we can use the site. Stage 2 will follow on later on. It will be the second story, which will be club facilities upstairs.
With around $500,000 in funding already pledged by various levels of government, building should start next month. And the Newcastle Velodrome didn't miss out on the state government Christmas wish list today, with $20,000 going towards new lighting facilities at the Adamstown track.
None of your friends know what you really do in England. You just say you ride bikes, but yeah, come back and ride in front of your friends and your family just makes it a lot better, and yeah, just show them how good you've come in the
Newcastle's police and bikers are practically brothers in arms. For the next 2 months, they'll be engaged in a bloody competition to see who can donate the most plasma to the Red Cross over summer. So far, the police are leading, up 25 donations on the bikers' 176.
Hey, come on, get out there, get a needle in you, suck a bit of blood out, and we'll beat them.
Meanwhile, a group of Newcastle and Lake Macquarie business people were busy loading trucks with Christmas goodies for families in need.
We've raised $2,400 and this year doubled the amount of hampers we're putting into the community, and we've now got the number up to 80 hampers.